Hello and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 919th New Social Environment. I'm Chloe Stagaman, Director of Programs here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Laura Anderson Barbata and Dan Cameron. We're thrilled to welcome poet Melina Casados here to close today's program. Before we get started, the Brooklyn Rail acknowledges Black Lives Matter. Here in New York, we're on Lenape-Hoking, the unceded land and waters of the Wappinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and Shinnecock Indian Nation. We recognize land acknowledgements are not a replacement for necessary decolonial work, but serve as a reminder place of the legacies of dispossession and enslavement that sustain and enrich the stolen land we are speaking from. And now I'll introduce today's guest and host. Laura Anderson Barbata is a transdisciplinary artist currently based in New York and Mexico City. Since 1992, she has initiated long-term projects and collaborations in the Venezuelan Amazon, Trinidad and Tobago, Mexico, Norway, and the United States that address social justice and the environment. Her work often combines performance, procession, dance, music, spoken word, textile arts, costuming, papermaking, zines, and protest. It's held in various private and public collections. And our host today, New York-based curator, art writer, and educator Dan Cameron, launched his career in 1982 with Extended Sensibilities at the New Museum, the first institutional effort in the United States to examine gay and lesbian identity in art. For over 40 years, Cameron has held senior curatorial positions at the New Museum, Orange County Museum of Art, and CAC New Orleans, and organized more than 100 exhibitions. In 2007, Dan founded Prospect New Orleans, the contemporary art triennial to benefit the city after Hurricane Katrina, and organized the first two editions. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Dan.
Great. Good afternoon, and thank you so much, Chloe. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'm really thrilled to be here with Laura Anderson Barbata, who currently has a really beautiful and engrossing exhibition at Marlborough Gallery. I encourage everybody to see it. I'm assuming some of you already have. I've been twice, and I can personally vouch for it gets better each time you see it. Certain pieces resonate a little bit more the second time, and I'm looking forward to a third visit. But before we get into talking about the works themselves, I wanted to welcome Laura, first of all, and to ask if you could just take us through a little bit of the journey of how you got here. I'm plugged in a little bit to your work, having seen it in different contexts in the past, but I know that your practice is far-flung, or we could even say nomadic a bit. But you claim that Mexico City and New York City as your home. So could you fill in a little bit the blank space for us in terms of biography and your background?
Yes, of course. Thank you. Well, I was born and raised in Mexico, and I have divided my time between Mexico, New York, Venezuela, and Trinidad and Tobago, as you said. So it has my work has taken me to different places. I began my practice in the studio, working with drawing and sculpture, a more conventional way, addressing nature and the environment, but also linking it to or having it stand as a metaphor of our inner self, the seeds as our inner self, right? Our hearts, or our motivations, our inspirations, our drives. And that was the metaphor. And this work took me to the Amazon of Venezuela, where I began a community-based project that is based on reciprocity and the exchange of knowledge, in which the community, the Yacuana community, taught me to make canoes in exchange for me teaching them to make books and paper, so that they could publish and write their own books, their own history, and their own words and illustrate it themselves. And this project grew to include the Yanomami community and the Piaroa community as well. So that's
When
how.
was this approximately, if you don't mind my jumping in?
Yes, thank you. The 90s. It was in the
So a
early
lot of
90s, like
90s who were
92.
and these are time intensive in the sense that you don't breeze in and breeze out a couple weeks later. You're really part of these communities for an extended period.
I believe that these works are more than anything relationships that are built. So I think that whole notion of going in and out quickly leads to a really a imbalance and an asymmetrical dynamic in not only power but knowledge and access. And so they are built on relationships that are sustained through conversations and through continual self-evaluation on all parts of the project, the intentions, the direction of the work. So yes, so these are very long-term projects. And we become good friends who have been through a lot and evolved through this work as well. And the projects evolve accordingly.
And it's probably safe to say that these are ongoing projects, as you mentioned, which means the relationships behind them are also sustained over years. It's not always about what the result is in concrete terms.
Absolutely. The relationships continue, and not only do they continue with me and the participants of the projects, but many of the collaborators and participants, and I'm not just talking about work in the Amazon, but also my work in Trinidad and Tobago, in Oaxaca, for example, begin to form within themselves networks of communication and exchange. And to me, those are very, very important. And I'm not aware of them. I don't need to be. And I'm excited that these projects can also facilitate new networks for the collaborators to work and be in contact with museums, with galleries, with collectors, with other audiences, for example.
Now, was there, for want of a better word, was there an existing imbalance in terms of the art world structure, how objects are refined and brought into a market as sort of rare and scarce, and really for presumably for a real elitist sector of society, as opposed to what you're doing? I mean, it feels like your work, this turn in your work where you began collaborating with your friends, who are in indigenous parts of the Amazon, really introduced a different set of values, completely about how objects of value and worth are developed and how they circulate, how people treat them. And that must have reflected somehow on your ideas about how the art world was functioning for you as a young artist at that time.
Wow, your question is very complex, and I thank you for that. So I'm my brain is going in many different directions. I think one of the most important things that this project offered me, and then it has extended to all aspects of my life, is the importance in reciprocity and the recognition and respect that that reciprocity facilitates for an exchange that we can continually be checking on, that can be horizontal. It can be also equally enriching and benefiting all parts. So when you ask about the art world, I don't know really how contemporary art world works. I still don't understand. I'm always trying to figure out how um, to address questions that I feel are important to us in a society. And the circulation of objects is, of course, one, but mainly the circulation of knowledge and the recognition of knowledge keepers. I think is also perhaps something that this project offers as a option for looking at our dynamics.
And would you say that the collaborative relationships that you have created in terms of structuring some of the long-term pieces that have a performance-based manifestation, are these meant in a way to exemplify this reciprocity where there's a giving and taking? Because I ask because you demand a lot of the people that you collaborate with in this particular work. These are not performers for hire, and these are not people who are casually involved. You all made a commitment to each other in order to be able to create this piece. And so I see it in a way as a microcosm of the sort of mutual systems of reciprocity that you're talking about.
Yes, I think and I really see it also as a way in which within our communities we can create networks of support for each other that really are sustained through this dynamic, right? The reciprocity, where we can form these relationships to help each other, especially having recognized and experienced today. I mean, we know how those systems that were meant to support societies and communities failed, and it was very obvious during COVID. And so if we within our own communities can create these networks of support, we can move outside of the and break away from those dependencies in a way. So I do, in these collaborations, the participants and collaborators share in the objectives of the project and the message, and have ownership over their own representation and expression in these performative pieces, and benefits all of us because we get exposure. We get to have our work seen by different audiences. We do these in public spaces, and so that's how I'm thinking about it, about the future too, like building community for the future.
So then it's probably safe to say there are multiple aspects to your practice, some of which are rooted in these collaborative relationships, and others of which involve you working by yourself in your studio, sort of processing some of this experience and knowledge that you have had firsthand.
Yes, thank you. And making some of the pieces myself. And then there's the other aspect. There are those networks and relationships that were formed that, how do you say, that spring out from this original coming together. I'm looking for a specific word. I will think of it.
Like
Constellation. Pardon me?
Like the shoots of a plant.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for that example. And so from there, and they don't depend on me anymore, but they were born in these dynamics, right? In this relationship, in this project, and then they go on and evolve. So that is very exciting to me as well. We don't see that.
No, not usually. I wanted to ask a little bit about the show at Marlborough, because you know, like many artists, I'm sure you're very excited to have this for many people an introduction to your work. But it's rare when an artist has a first show at a gallery, an introductory show at that gallery, and what you get isn't just the most recent work, but really an opportunity to see various stages of how your art has developed over the years and how different projects have evolved. And I'm wondering, how did that all, I mean, it feels very much like a museum curated exhibition. So I'm curious myself to sort of dig away at that and see how it took the form that it did.
Oh, well, actually, who can best answer these questions are the three directors of Marlborough Gallery, Sebastian Sarmiento, Alexa Bursinski, and Nicole Sisti, who curated the exhibition and who took a lot of time and care and attention to really dig into my practice and look at it. They went to Mexico City, they went to my storage, they went to my studio. They know my work very well now, and curated the exhibition themselves. And they really will, I think what they've done is really, I'm very proud of it. It's very beautiful to see how the threads of their selection take us through a journey of growth and of relationship building and through objects. And it's yeah, so and so it was a long time with their selection of works, revisiting works, changing checklists, and but they took no they cut no corners. Is that the proper expression?
Right.
In their, like, they would have really specific ideas of the pieces and would went to whatever was necessary to have them here in New York for the gallery. So I'm really happy to see this, and their selection I think is really smart.
Very much so. That's why I asked. And one more kind of background question. When was your last show in New York?
Oh, my last show. I'm quite bad to remember.
Done my homework and tracked it down.
Maybe I have. Would you consider one of my interventions an exhibition?
Why not?
Okay, so that was 2021. Oh no, actually this year I did an intervention at Columbia University. So uptown there was an intervention. So, and before that, also in Midtown, I did an intervention. I had another exhibition at MoMA where I was in a group show. Thank you. That came from the comments. I'm so bad at remembering. So I was in an exhibition that closed the day my show at Marlborough opened, and that was Chosen Memories, the collection from Patricia Phelps de Cisneros at MoMA. So yes.
Well, it's exciting to me because, again, I've seen your work in bits and pieces, but never so much all at once. So it really was a museum kind of treatment. Let's talk about some of the works individually, if we can. This is one I particularly love, Fruto a punto de madurar.
Thank you. So this is earlier work. As I mentioned, when I went first to the Amazon, which was 92, I was working in the studio with sculpture and drawing, and really looking at plants and seeds and the environment and temperature to talk about stages of the experience of being human. And at first, you can see here from the date 94, I'm starting to go to the Amazon and continue to work in this more symbolic way, these natural pretexts for working. But the experience in the Amazon was deeply important, also because of not only because of the environment, the green and being in the rainforest, but also because what I was seeing as a Mexican, seeing indigenous communities living in these areas, the proximity and relationship with the missions, with the military, started to be, it was very important to begin to address those topics in my work. And you see that change in the selection of works at Marlborough.
And was a piece like this made while you were in the Amazon, or were the materials brought back with you to Mexico City, or how did the piece as a artwork, where did the materials come from?
The materials, the bottom half, are all pieces that I bought and collected from different like fairs and outdoor markets in the US and in Mexico. And then the top part, the gourds, are all from the Amazon. So this has both. And this work is made not in the Amazon. So while I'm in the Amazon, I'm strictly working on the project with the community. Mm-hmm. I'm doing sketches, but in a little notebook. That's it. Mm-hmm.
Can we move on to some of the other works?
Great. Mm-hmm.
So can you talk about the piece that's on the floor in the middle with the canoe?
Yes, of course. So this is a self-portrait. I feel very strongly that as an artist, the practice and discipline of self-portraiture is very important, and that we must practice it regularly. And so this is one of my self-portraits, one of the earlier self-portraits, meaning that that came after I had been working in the Amazon for a while. Now that canoe so you have a river of marigold flowers, which are very much connected to Mexico's traditions for Day of the Dead, for example, and just putting the flowers there. So it offers not only lots of layers of ritual and traditions from my country, but also it provides the spectator with a different experience of aroma that you encounter in the gallery from the petals of flowers. And the canoe is a very small version, a miniature of the canoes that here's a photo in the center of the first canoe that I was working on. That was the way that the way that I started to work in the Amazon, or how I became interested to work in the Amazon. So this is a miniature, and on this boat, on this canoe, is a figure without a head, which that's me, and at the front of the canoe is a dog who has ears and eyes and a voice, and whereas the figure in the back is headless from the shoulders up and is covered with corn and dirt from my studio, and it is really about the journey of life and following your inner intelligence, inner eyes, inner mind, inner heart, inner thoughts.
And could you say a word about the paintings as well in the background? We can just go back.
Yes, of course. Those works, as I mentioned earlier, are the motive of these works, or the point of departure, are seeds. So I was sprouting seeds in the studio all the time, and still thinking about what are those invisible things, because I can't see them, that make a seed sprout. It's humidity, it's earth, it's the right conditions, the temperature. And so thinking about and looking for that as that moment when it changes from the dormant seed to the living seed, and that instant I feel is important as a person to look for, right? That moment of the epiphany. And so that's what these are. These are explorations of what are those environments? What is the experience? What do you feel when that you have that moment of aha, right? It is symbolized by a seed in these cases, and they're all works on paper. So I'm very, I love paper and black and white, and just really trying to be very rigorous with the practice of drawing.
Now, just to back up, you actually are growing. These are, when you say seeds in this case, you're not it's not a metaphor. These are plants that you're developing. And so you're thinking about how you go from germination, from the seed to germination into what eventually becomes a plant outside of the soil.
Exactly. Like you have a jar of beans in your cupboard for years. They remain the same. Suddenly you interact with them and they begin to change, and that change just continues forever. And I think that's really magical.
Can we focus in on the piece that's on the pedestal? There's a very evocative work called El Libro de los Magos de Popol Vuh.
Yes. So this work, so my work goes from being more of the natural environment, this organic, I don't know, symbolism maybe, to more really focusing my work. Began because of being in the Amazon and facing the realities and our history in Latin America. I started to study a lot more in a different way to be able to discuss it in my work. Studies on Mexico before the Spanish invasion, before colonialism, and thinking about the Popol Vuh and different subjects and access to spirituality, as opposed to the imposed
Catholicism.
Exactly. So Libro de los Magos del Popol Vuh are two gods, and one is very evil and one is very playful, and removes the teeth of the evil one while he sleeps and puts corn instead of teeth in his mouth while he is sleeping, and the other has pearls. So you see motifs over and over again. This piece is also made with honey wax. So you see materials repeated. You see pearls over and over again in the exhibition, corn as well in different manifestations, in different ways, because of just the infinite layers of meaning and history of the materials themselves.
Wonderful. Well, there's so many expressions. Your work is so interdisciplinary, and I could linger on the sculpture, for the whole time we have together. But I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about some of the more graphic-based works that are in the exhibition, because I know you have a practice of dealing with materials, sometimes found materials, photographs. At other times, you've worked with sort of cultural symbols like the Virgin Mary that are sort of universally understood, but which you kind of deconstruct and use for your own purposes. Sorry, I'm jumping way ahead of the slideshow. Yeah, moderators, but it's a little bit past this. I think we're getting into it now. There's a particular, if you back up 2 images, there's one piece.
Are you thinking about Gloria, the lenticular? Oh, this image.
I am, but I'm thinking of this piece for starters, okay, which is made using portraits. Is that right?
That is correct. And so if you remember in the self-portrait that we saw on the canoe, I have no head, and I talk about the removal of the head as a reference to learning to see and to live in this world with the center of yourself. And in this work, these are portraits that are my father had bought. He had them in his studio, and he passed away. And when I went to see his studio, he had collected all of these, and they're unsigned. We don't know who the artists are.
Or the subjects.
Excuse me?
You don't know who the subjects are either. They're just anonymous,
exactly
by an anonymous painter.
Exactly. And so I was at the time going to the Amazon frequently. I was studying about rituals in Mesoamerica. I was thinking about the removal of the face and the head from us, and also the practice in Mexico of removing the faces and sometimes even the skin of people to wear them in rituals. And so a lot of this work, I'm thinking about liberating people from the identities that we read, that we give so much meaning to, gender, age, race, expressions. We assume so much from this, and often we limit those individuals to our own reading of them, and we do not let them out of that. So here, my intention is to do two things. One is to liberate them, and so behind them are leaves that are sewn. And the other is also the pain that's involved with having to do something like this, because it liberates you, but it's also painful to recognize that we must often do something that hurts to be free.
And what kind of leaves are they? You said they were sewn together.
Yes, there's lotus leaves, lotus flower leaves. Yes.
So there is a reference to sort of cyclical cycles of cyclical cycles, two cycles of life.
Yes, absolutely, of nature and the environment, of course. Yes. So it connects us back to that.
And another piece I wanted to talk about is Gloria, where it's kind of remarkable how well you have sort of replaced or reconstituted this iconic image in a way that allows it to be, I would say, kind of reborn and reimagined as something, as a figure that has all the magic, but doesn't need to be limited to a specific personality, a specific historical personage, if I can say it that way.
Right. Thank you. Well, I was trying, this is 2006. I'm still traveling and going to the Amazon. So my work becomes very much focused on studying the Catholic imposition during colonialism, which continues today because the practice in the missions continues. And so I'm thinking about what are these symbols intended to provide for us humans? And as conversion tactics and mechanisms, they are supposedly a mother figure, a blessing figure, and also creating a parallel with the goddesses of pre-colonial times of Mesoamerica. And so how can I liberate this image, her? So I do the same thing. I remove her from the shoulders up, of her face, her gender, her age, her expressions, facial expressions, and so that she can perform what she really is supposed to do, which is to bless, to bring life, to bring light. But it's, but there's a tension there, because there is a certain degree of violence in the act, but at the same time, she is performing this. And so this is a lenticular image. It has 24 layers, and it has both characteristics of 3D and movement. So the lotus flowers at the bottom open and close, and the rays from her palms open and, become brighter and lower. And so does the halo as well. And then I wanted this very acid green color behind to contrast as if this wasn't artificial enough, but it is commenting on the artificiality the manipulation of religion as well. And that is a photo of me. And I'm standing on a gym ball, so it was a little difficult to keep my balance, but and the flowers were opening literally, and we were photographing in a studio. As they opened, I didn't realize lotus flowers were so opening up so quickly.
So you really had very little time to shoot the What it also makes me think about is how religion, especially Catholicism, and especially in a country like Mexico, went through a kind of a mestizo phase, if we can call it that, where there was an adaptation of the imported gods, or the imposed outside gods, to beliefs, or if we can talk about it in the least violent terms possible, a customization of the imposed beliefs, so that the system of belief, again, I'm improvising wildly here, could go on uninterrupted, so that beliefs could be maintained, and the figures aren't all that different. You can make a sort of an easy transposition, as long as you don't have to remind yourself too much of a specific story about a specific mother and a specific child, and the sacrifice of that child. Here it's become more an image of consolation, of sort of a radiant power. So it's been, as you said, liberated, freed from this constraining definition. Not that Mary has an infinitude of definitions within the Catholic faith, as we know, but I think that in this case, this specifically refers to the creative adaptation of Catholicism to local needs.
That's a very interesting observation of yours, and it's like maybe you're also talking about syncretism, and how mechanisms to but syncretism is actually a response that is for survival, because if you did not follow and honor these images, you could be killed. So when you mention how the beliefs could be maintained, or the rituals, I would add to what you've said, the beliefs, I don't know if they were maintained, but the rituals were adapted, right? So inside the Virgin Mary was the goddess in Mexico, and inside of many of the saints who represented different elements or aspects of life, had inside, so people were worshiping their gods from inside, not the outside. So I think it's a survival mechanism, and you see it still today happening, influence practice and rituals. And so that's,
I guess it reminded me, and this is, again, it's almost like the flip side of the same coin, but of the Virgin of Guadalupe, and how she was created,
yes,
as a response, is to say, well, okay, we'll take this structure, but we'll define it with our own protagonist, and
right.
will have the characteristics that we, the people, bestow upon her, not what you in Rome decide what's good for us. I know it wasn't like that, but I think the popular mythology has allowed the Virgin of Guadalupe to occupy an almost autonomous space within world Catholicism. And this piece feels like that as well. It's got an autonomy at the same time that continuity is there as well. So I didn't use the word syncretist because it didn't seem to fit. But I do feel that there's a parallel relationship here to the original.
Wow. Yes. Well, the Virgin Guadalupe is really fascinating. It was a really smart move on the Catholic Church to really galvanize and motivate people to feel that Catholicism had a place and a voice in our country. And the Virgin Guadalupe is, yeah, she's so important in Mexico and the United States as well, and growing around the world. She's her own.
Unlike the Catholic Church, the Virgin of Guadalupe is doing great.
Yeah, she is. She's got a good PR.
I wanted to move on to some of the more performance-based works, because I think that the role of ritual in your work is so important. And I think it starts in terms of the show with us seeing the costume, seeing how the garments are constructed for the participants in the performance. And this is very rich body of work that I think New Yorkers are seeing. I'm sure they're seeing it mostly for the first time.
Thank you. Well, these are works that were developed in my studio, also in collaboration with artists from Jamaica, from Trinidad and Tobago, from different countries of Latin America, and inspired by many of our traditions. And yes, so the work has multiple layers of interpretation, of reading, of construction, of materiality, and of existence. So they are, these, for example, on the left are inspired by Los Diablos de la Costa Chica de Guerrero, and the Diablos are, this is inspired by them. And they also have we have collaborated together on Intervention Indigo, which is this piece, and they are from the Afro Guerrero coast of Mexico. And a lot of people don't know that there's such a wide and rich culture, Afro-Mexican culture. So Los Diablos de la Costa perform a dance, and Diablos means devils. It's a dance of resistance. It's a dance that mocks patriarchy and the government and power and colonialism and the binary as well. So it's so they are an important part of this intervention, for example. But just like that, each character has a whole story and narrative and connections.
When you do a work like Indigo, I asked you a little bit about your formation at the start of the talk, and you didn't mention that you had any background in dance or movement or theater or music, for that matter. And so I'm wondering if you took on these medium, these new performative media, this vocabulary performance, because you felt it was the only way to express the ideas that you wanted to present through your art, or was there already this natural inclination to dance, to music, that came together because you met the people that you met in the Amazon and in Mexico? Because I feel like you don't claim to be a musician or a dancer, and yet you seem to have a very inside perspective on how to make a public performance work that incorporates all of these features.
Thank you. Well, I think I could say yes, but more than anything, yes, that is the medium for the piece, which I felt was more accurate. But I also feel that we are, as individuals, as artists, we are so informed and shaped by what we have seen, what we have experienced, what we have lived. And I grew up in Mazatlan. It's one of the largest carnivals in Mexico. And so that was in my subconscious. As a child, I danced in Mazatlan for tourists who threw coins at me. So there's a little of that. But what really changed me and really opened my eyes to the possibilities of textiles and movement and public space was my work in Trinidad and Tobago. And I began to work in Trinidad and Tobago by invitation of CCA 7 in the year 2000. And I became asked to be accepted as a volunteer for a stilt dancing group who had no volunteers, and who the stilt dancers following traditions, West African traditions of Moko Jambi. And that's where I really, only as a volunteer, helping and seeing this collaborative creation, and then taking it to the streets and the possibilities of public space, the potential it has. Now, I was working within the context of Carnival there, but then I wanted to bring it to the streets myself, what I had learned. So that's what you see there. I learned so much there.
So the stilt walkers really were the beginning of performative work as such, where you decided to go and do it yourself in the streets of, well, Brooklyn.
Yes, these kinds of performances, because I had done performances before, single performances and actions, as I call them, like even in the Amazon with communities, we do these actions that, just who was there would see them. And they still are like that. I usually don't make a big promotion of them, and whoever happens to encounter them does. So I was doing performances before, but very small scale, not like this. And stilt dancing provided me also something else that to me is very, very important, is that stilt dancers, they are keepers of a tradition that is, I feel, very important for our society. They are responsible in West Africa for, because of their height, the metaphor is incredible. They can see beyond, and they can foresee evil, and they are called in to bless and cleanse societies and communities. And the participants and collaborators of the Brooklyn Jumbies, who I've been working with since 2007, they are based here in New York, can carry this legacy with them. And I invite that practice and its symbolism and its power and its place as a spiritual action that we need in our society through contemporary art.
And these, just for clarification, these are stilts. These are working stilts that you made, or can they not be used by stilt walkers?
Oh, they have been used.
They have been used.
Yes, these were
veterans.
used. These have been used in Oaxaca by the Zancudos de Sachila, a traditional stilt dancing group from Oaxaca, and the Brooklyn Jumbies, who come together through a project I began, which is transcommunality. And they began this exchange, and I invited also local artisans from Oaxaca to contribute to this coming together of these two practices for their festivities, their annual festivities and processions.
And can you tell us about the piece that's on the right in this image that looks like a large cape or tunic?
Yes, this is titled Happy Suit, and this was performed by one of the Brooklyn Jumbies in Chinatown in New York, and it is made completely from discarded materials from the textile industry. And these are tests where they are working on color combinations and yarn thicknesses, and so all of the work that is part of this intervention were discarded materials that I picked up on the street in New York, and everything.
Literally discarded industrial waste.
Yeah, there's pretty great stuff thrown out. That's very useful.
Yeah. Can you say a little bit more about transcommunality?
Yes, of course. So transcommunality was a project that I feel begins in Trinidad and Tobago, in which I begin to work with stilt dancing communities there, and then find that it is important to create these links and bridges, construct bridges of knowledge and exchange. Because as I worked in Trinidad also with carnival designers, I became interested in this dynamic. And then I was offered an exhibition in New York, and I wanted to bring what I had learned in Trinidad. And so transcommunality is bridging together of communities to perform and to come to the street together. And in many cases, it has involved Trinidad and Tobago, Oaxaca, Brooklyn, Mexico, artists from Senegal. We've also worked with stilt dancer communities in Singapore, and with dancers in Jamaica. And so it is about creating that community that erases borders through the sharing of practices and the exchange of our practices, enriching them with whatever we can contribute.
And is it safe to say that learning that there is a stilt walking tradition in Trinidad, Tobago, and there's a stilt walking tradition in Oaxaca, Mexico, and the two probably knew nothing about each other, and in your own studies, in your own travel, in your own journey, you saw this, you found this, I'm going to call it coincidence, between these two cultural forms, and you've literally brought them together.
Yes, I feel it was very important to do that. They didn't know about each other's practice. And the beautiful thing about the practice is that, or this building a bridge or facilitating this exchange, is that it strengthens each community's group's commitment to their own practice as they share it proudly with somebody else who does a very similar or the same kind of practice, but with different historical meaning or developments, or even stilt styles, movement styles. And I had noticed in Oaxaca that the group was dwindling. It was smaller. It was less people interested. They would go to their processions wearing T-shirts from, that they got free from Corona beer and jeans and things like that. And so through this exchange, it triggers this also this, I want to show you what I do the best I can. And so the commitment from each group to their own practice becomes more strong instead of weaker, right? And that was really exciting for all the groups to learn about each other's practice. And then they're challenging each other. You try this that I do. And so, yeah.
And you said now stilt walkers from Senegal have also become sort of involved in this conversation.
Naja Codrington was initiated following very strict traditions from Senegal. So that's why I mentioned Senegal, because he, who is one of the leaders and founders of the Brooklyn Jumbies, was initiated in Senegal. Yes, exactly. And we've had, he invites also stilt dancers into his group from many places as well.
Well, I think we've whetted the audience's appetite enough. I think this is the best cue that we could imagine for cutting to the video so that we can see some of the performance of Indigo. And just what year was this?
2015. It was first performed in Brooklyn, New York, and then in Ciudad de Mexico in 2021.
Great. So let's watch a couple minutes of this if we can.
Thank you.
Now, how long was the performance? Because the video, has a lot of cuts, and it's hard to tell what the
Um,
duration.
So it started at the police precinct and then wove its way through the residential areas, cut through Maria Hernandez Park, and then ended up in where a lot of artist studios are. So it, symbolically, it's this journey, right, from demanding justice, the park, anyway. But that took probably an hour or something like that, moving all the time.
And how many performers were there?
19 performers.
And all of the costumes were made by you?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, and the headpieces. And so, and the characters design, also many of the characteristics are developed with the performers themselves, who give me feedback about movement. We develop it further, they contribute, like Chris Walker, who is a brilliant choreographer and dancer from Jamaica, who teaches at University of Wisconsin, contributed a lot to his character, who performs Rolling Calf, and who you see at the beginning of this piece with the indigo face, strings or yarns, and the big horns. Yes, so everyone.
And it was never repeated. It was done this one day. Well, it was done again in Mexico City a couple of years.
That is correct. And it's been exhibited in a few museums as an installation, along with a video, but only performed twice.
And just one more technical question, because I'm a curator. I love knowing these things. How long did you prepare to do that one performance?
Oh, well, it depends on if you're referring to the construction of the pieces or just preparing the logistics and the
rehearsals and the logistics, I think, was what I'm most.
Okay, so once we have all the characters, you're already thinking about what you're going to do on the street. So it was a few months to get us all organized, also to get everybody's calendar to be able to coincide and find a date that works for everyone too. So, and because we're small, we're independent, we can claim our own calendar and do it. So,
and are there any future projects that you want to share that have performative or ritualistic elements to them?
Well, there's yes, in conversation, there's a couple of one performance for New York that is in conversation still, and I've been developing this body of work also related to cochinilla, its historical meaning, its materiality, its characteristics, also working on drawings related to it. So yeah, there's those things taking place right now in the studio. But
Wonderful.
nothing, I don't have a date I can give you.
We can't tell people to put on their calendar yet.
Not yet. I will let you know, though.
Well, this might be as good a place as any to open it up to maybe some questions. I've noticed there were a couple of questions already bubbling up in the background. Is that right, Chloe?
Yeah, thank you so much, Dan and Laura, for that incredibly generous and enlightening conversation. It was such a pleasure to listen to. We do have a few questions trickling in right now. While we're contacting folks to make sure they want to be unmuted, I'll ask my question to you, Laura, which is, I'm curious how you think about scale in your studio, especially in relationship to your sculptures. There are so many that are so small, and they create this really intimate gaze and spectatorship in the gallery space. And I was curious how you thought about that and how that factors into your studio process.
I think about the power of size, and sometimes the smallest, quietest thing can be incredibly loud and strike us. So in the exhibition, you'll see pieces that are a few centimeters couple of inches big to pieces that are, I don't know how tall those are. They're like 4 meters high characters. So I think I like to challenge myself, but I believe that a piece that is small like that, like the hand that we saw earlier, has as much power as the Jumbie King that is 4 meters high, but it's quieter. It really demands that you focus and that your attention be on that. And that is a very, I'm honored that people will look at it because I'm really demanding a lot from them. So I do think about scale. I think about those pauses in our lives when those ideas are the most powerful. Like that's what the scale has to do with, in my opinion.
You can really feel that in the exhibition. Thank you so much for that answer. I'm going to ask a question on behalf of Michelle in the audience. Michelle is wondering how you consider the notion of authorship. You consider your collaborators authors?
Great. Yes, my collaborators are authors, and and each one is credited in the works you will see. You can also hear, there's QR codes in the exhibition with statements from the collaborators themselves, the artisans that participated in the works. And, you know, people have different expectations of how to work and what they want for being a part of the project. And so those are all considered. And so you'll see the credits are always in the videos. But again, there's some really wonderful QR codes that are the statements by and I think those are just as important as the work itself. Now, a lot of people don't go look at those QR codes, but I think that's what's, you know, the human part is so rich to me.
Thank you for that question, Michelle, and thank you for that response, Laura. The next question is from my colleague, Eleanor. Eleanor, I'll pass the mic to you.
Thanks, Chloe. And thank you so much, Laura and Dan. This has been an incredible conversation. Congratulations on the amazing work. Laura, I was wondering if you could share a bit about if or how you engage with various political movements in the locations where you engage work, or how you kind of see either your practice or maybe a little bit more broadly how art fits into those movements.
I think there is, well, the works in my case respond, of course, to our world. And our world is political, politicized, and social. And so the works will respond to that. And there are instances in which, as part of a contemporary human in this, you know, living in this time, I feel I must respond. For example, one of the works I did in the past is Intervention Wall Street, which was in response of the economic crisis provoked by many of these by Wall Street and these financial institutions. And so the work is a commentary and a protest to abuses, and it coincides with Occupy Wall Street, of course. And so we are part of a moment, and I think the more voices from artists, the better, right, that we can. Intervention Indigo is in a response to police violence towards people of color in the United States and all over the world as well. So it looks at the historical significance of the color, the symbolism, and the power of the community, and the reminder for our communities to organize and galvanize and create networks of support within each other, which relates to a question that Dan asked earlier about these networks of community exchange that can be in contrast or can resist some of the dominant ways. Thank you for that question, Eleanor.
Thank you so much. That was an amazing answer.
Thank you.
Great question. The last question today is going to be from Kati in the audience, and I will ask on their behalf. Kati says, it seems that your pieces are fragile. Is this intentional so that they evolve with time, or do you intend for them to be repaired with time?
Great question, hard question. Some of the works definitely are related to, they must respond to time and they must change with time, because like ourselves, our bodies will evolve and change, and we can say many things about that. But some of the works there are self-portraits on textiles that will change, that will fade, that I think are direct commentaries on our physical presence in this, on this earth. So most of them will change, yes, and they should change, as we all should. Thank you for that question.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you for that question, Kati. Thank you for that Q&A, everyone. That was really lovely, and thank you, Dan and Laura, for your conversation. At the Rail, we have a tradition of ending our community events with a poetry reading, and it's my absolute pleasure to welcome our Poet Laureate of the day, Melina Casados, to the stage. Melina Casados is a poet, educator, and daughter of Central American immigrants with roots in North Carolina. Now living in New York, Melina teaches at Brooklyn College, where she received her MFA in poetry and was a Rona Jaff Found Fellowship recipient. Melina serves as the poetry editor for Snapdragon, a journal of art and healing, and she is chronically invested in identity, culture, and care. And with that, I will pass it over to Melina.
Thanks so much, Chloe. And thank you again, Dan and Laura. That was, I feel like there's so much from this conversation that I'm just going to be carrying with me. That was really lovely. I'm going to just close off with, I have 3 shortish poems today. And you will be rewarded for thinking placement breeze has a home with youth crawling its way up, up, up my throat, scratching in wonder where no longer folk we've ascended to hairs of our feelings, and you will be a tad bit hungry. We'll agree to soup after we assert this grass into soil. It works just the same, or no? Hello? The sound of my mom's static phone sigh has become more tangible than her face. Pero Meli, tú eres muy bonita. Pues porque mi mamá es tan bonita. I imagined these moments witnessed, internalized the blurring into May. Can't bring herself to call these days, and when she does, I cancel everything to ask what she's been eating and why. Yeah, girl, I watched a documentary to empathize with your avoidant coping patterns. Perhaps your microbiome is as footprint as this tree bark. It's okay. I have problems too. I just learned how to accessorize them. Let's sit by this art disguised as floor to acknowledge our need for breath when tahine starts to numb tongue and, well, any other awakening of your boundaries. The 3rd lick is as porous as the 10th, prompts staring into each other's palms. I'm sure this time we'll pinpoint what makes them different from eyes. Let it be known that I cared. And in the expansion of mind, I reckoned with my culture. It was in me too. We're at an energy war, I say over morning oatmeal, you a mindless hum. We're at an energy war, I say over drinks at the bar, but the music is too loud. We let loose the edges of the controlled environment during a weekly lecture, inspiring me to see the pleasure from here until our nightly scroll. I spoke in a tremor that unraveled everyone's sense of belonging. We hold these truths, we hold them like clay, holding until we break. My paths against the void made legendary as made self-evident by my joy for validating your curiosity. It's true, my skin has grooves as made evident by your day, the meeting, the appointment, all arranged as I wade through clear waters, comforted by the all I can't see except it's me preparing dinner, you calling it sweet, so sweet. Who do you daughter to? My words are sliding against glass and they taste like earth. String around my wrist I've mistaken for yours. Everything is energy. As American as my name, most Americans can't pronounce the distinction between empathy and this denim. Your home away from control, the details lost by the rivering of all that family matter. Keep it lush. If there's one thing to carry, let it be the silence. Pillared by honor and trust, these columns were inspired by Rome. Go down a layer, it's Guatemalteco, one level closer to what floors you, pero I know what was in this green juice. No, mija, everything is city. Traffic y los chuchos and this view. Here's city with trees, city made of trees, and these are just trees. You ask me how I know where I am. It's the leaves, the leaves, the leaves. Thank you.
Wow.
Melina, that was so beautiful. Thank you so, so much.
Really.
Yeah, really, really beautiful. Thank you. And thank you again to Laura and to Dan. And thank you to the team at Marlborough who were so helpful in preparing for today's event. We'd also like to thank the Terra Foundation for American Art, who sponsor the NSE and make daily conversations like this one possible, and for their support of our growing archive, which you can view on the Rails YouTube channel. The Brooklyn Rail for 23 years has provided a platform for arts, culture, and politics through our monthly publication and public events like this one, our daily NSE. You can check the chat for a link to donate to support our work at the Rail. And if you're free on Monday at 1 p.m., join us for a conversation between Willa Nassiter and Ksenia M. Soboliva on the occasion of Nassiter's solo exhibition at Chapter, New York. We'll conclude with a poetry reading by Nora Treatbaby. And as is our tradition, you can now turn on your microphones and say hello and goodbye as you leave. Thank you so, so much for joining us today, and have inspiring weekends, everyone.
Great. Thank you,
Thank
Chloe.
you.
Thanks, Laura.
Amazing
Thank
conversation.
you.
Thank you, Melina.
Dan,
Bye.
Laura, and Melina. Great.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.
Melina, that was so
Laura.
beautiful.
Hey, Pong, thank you.
Congratulations
Thank
on
you
the
so
beautiful
much.
show. Thank you. Go see the show, everybody.
The show,
Please.
Thank you.
October 28th.
Congratulations.
Bye,
Thank you so
everybody.
much.
Bye.
Thank you for
Lovely
being here.
weekend.
Thank you. Beautiful.